And welcome back to our local candidate interviews on WFJA and WWGP Radio, brought to you by Sandhills Broadcasting and Brick Capital Video. We're here in the WFJA studio. I'm Bob Joyce, your host for today's Lee County Board of Education candidate interviews. I'd like to remind you that today through Thursday, each afternoon, these interviews will air live on WFJA and WWGP, as well as stream on the WFJA website. Videos of the candidate interviews will post on the website. Our next interview this afternoon for the Lee County Board of Education is Republican Alan Rummel. Alan, welcome.
Thanks.
We're happy to have you here this afternoon. So let's just start by telling those who have tuned in today a little bit about yourself, your background, and then
Sure.
Maybe why you made the decision to run for the Board of Education.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to share some of that information. And so like you said, my name's Alan Rummel, and I'm running for Board of Education. I have lived in Lee County since about 7th grade. I went to West Lee, and then my family moved to Harnett County, so I actually went to Western Harnett High and graduated from there. So shortly after I graduated, I moved back to Sanford and started working at Caterpillar. I think I was 19 years old, and so I've been there ever since. I started on the assembly line out there, and had the opportunity to finish up to do a machining technology degree at CCCC here in town, and then I was actually able to do a 4-year program through East Carolina Online for industrial technology.
Okay.
Yep. So that was really good. So I've been married to my wife Amanda for 13 years now, and we've got 2 little boys that go to Deep River Elementary School. So that's,
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so obviously that's part of the reason I'm here.
Yeah.
But I've thought about the why question a lot, and I've boiled that thing down to 2 short answers, and I'll give you a little detail too. So I'm running because I feel called to step up to the plate right now, and I feel like I'm equipped to handle some of the things that I see as a problem with our current board. So when I say I'm called, I'll give you a quick backstory, hopefully, for that. But so my youngest son started kindergarten this year, this school year. And when we dropped him off the first day, I thought I was prepared for that because we didn't get an open house and all those things.
Yeah.
So he got out of the car and he has his mask on and all those things. And there's a teacher there to escort him into the school. But he took a few steps and he looked back at me and my wife and just a little bit of fear in his eyes, obviously, and it was like, hey, you guys aren't coming with me. And so it made me upset, and I was kind of angry, and one of the first things that came to mind was, who's going to step up and do something, and stand up for the kids? And not just with COVID. There's things with critical race theory going on in the country, and I feel like there's people trying to teach kids that skin color is a character trait, and I disagree with that. And then there's people trying to have sexual discussions with very young kids too, and I don't like that either. So who's going to step up and do something? And I stewed on that question for a while that day, and it hit me at one point that wasn't a question for me to ask somebody. That was, I feel like God put that one in my head and said, hey, Alan, you're upset. Who's going to stand up and do something for my kids? And so that completely changed my thought process, and I said, okay, well, I'm willing to step up to the plate, and so I went and looked into it, and that's why I say I feel called. On the equip side now, so shortly after that, I started attending board meetings, and some things I found that kind of bothered me is I feel like the current board, they don't like to share information that they use to base their decisions on, even if they're specifically asked by parents to share that. It's kind of hard to get information, and then I've noticed that they tend to shy away from discussion a bit within, across board members before they make decisions. I think that's kind of, you need that collaboration to make a good decision. And then I've seen instances where they kind of double down on decisions that I feel were poorly made. But, everybody's comfortable with status quo a lot. Change is hard. So I just feel like they tend to double down on things. So I feel like I'm equipped to address that. So through my career at Caterpillar, the last 12 years or so, part of my job roles has always been to take warranty data and identify problems and come up with a solution and implement those solutions. And then I think the most important step is the follow-up. So I have to follow those solutions through and make sure that they were effective. And honestly, they're not always effective. I've had to go back to the drawing board several times, whether it's for small tweaks, and other ones just scrap the whole thing and start fresh again. And I feel like that's very important to be able to do that, to not get emotionally invested in your decisions, to say, hey, this isn't working, throw it away, let's try again. So I feel like I'm equipped to address that decision-making problem that I see on the board. So yeah, that's my why. I feel called to step up and equipped to make a difference.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
The current school board, of course, has had tremendous challenges with COVID-19. A lot of people were providing advice and, on a situation that came on in kind of a hurry. Now they're trying to have some sort of return to normal. How do you think the Board of Education handled the COVID, we'll say, pandemic throughout the whole thing so far? And what do you see as kind of the main challenges as we kind of move to the next phase of going back to normal?
Sure. So I guess as far as the boards, how they handled COVID, I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. I feel like they did kind of a terrible job with it. Now, obviously, I understand the lockdowns that happened with COVID. At the beginning, we didn't know what was going on. It was obviously a new disease on the scene. So I don't think that was a bad decision, at the federal level to take that step back and pause. But once that authority came back to the local level to say, hey, you guys can set your own masking policies and other things, remote learning policies, I felt like our board kind of gave up that authority, and rather than making their own decisions and having open discussion at the meetings, they would just take whatever the state said they should do. They would just do that. And I think it's important to have, you have that local authority as a school board. So I think members should be able to take information and kind of analyze it, answer their own questions, and see what's best for Lee County. Now, something that bothered me a bit too, so I made comments before the board regarding masking, and I noticed a person that was presenting information to the board kind of made some false statements with regards to excluding kids from school, those policies, and I actually filed some grievances against that and went through that grievance process. And I guess the only action I really saw was eventually that individual no longer gave those COVID updates. Somebody else took over. But I think it's very important to be honest, about what we're doing and how these decisions are being made. And I also think it's important, so as we continued through COVID, I think a lot of studies came out that talked about the learning loss associated with shutdowns and masking, and then got into more detail on the risk level for the kids. And I think as a board member, you've really got to be willing to be open-minded. So as information changes, you have to kind of reanalyze where you're at and don't get emotionally attached to a decision that you've made previously. And I mean, I guess I'd end that, so I said I feel like they did terrible, but so the learning loss metrics were pretty sobering in Lee County. So as far as test scores go, there was a 30 to 50% drop in pass rates in every single subject in every single grade. So, I mean, it was just absolutely massive, the learning loss. So I just feel like we didn't do a very good job.
This next question, of course, is about remote learning, and since you've kind of given your position on that, let me kind of skip to the end of this question, which is, what do you think the school board learned from this? And what do you think we should do about teaching? God forbid if this ever happened again.
Yeah.
But what do you think we learned about teaching remotely that we could put to better use?
I mean, I think with remote learning, so I guess for my family, so I had my oldest boy was in school, and so he did remote learning, and we're blessed to have my wife able to stay home with the kids, so she was there, to be on his butt and make sure that, if she heard the teacher say, Max, then you need to pay attention, she was on it. And I know that not all families have that luxury, obviously. So to be completely honest, Bob, I don't know the answer. I feel like the teachers certainly did the best they could, and we tried to support my son's teacher as we were able, but that's hard to do also remotely. But I don't have a good answer for that question.
It's a really difficult.
Yeah.
my wife is she's retired now, fourth grade school teacher, and
Sure.
and did some remote teaching,
Yeah.
and it was just a very, very difficult. As you point out, I think it really depended on whether parents were there to help.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
And as you said, not all families have that luxury. One question that we've been asked to ask everyone is about the partisanship on the Board
Sure.
of Education. We had not been a partisan election until the last several years. So, is there a place for partisan questions? What are your thoughts on this at the Board of Education?
Sure. So, I guess I would say, as an elected board member, people are voting for a person, right? Not for a party. So I think each board member should be able to make their own decisions regardless of, party direction.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that I assume it's normal for, party leadership to talk to their elected officials and, give them the party stance. And I think those folks should absolutely, listen to their thoughts and the logic behind it. But I think an elected person should listen, if I'm elected to the board, I'm a Republican. If the Democrat chairman has an opinion on something and they want to call me up, I should be able to listen to them also.
Mm-hmm.
And same goes for parents or teachers, anybody that has a valid opinion on something coming up. I think a board member should be able to consider that opinion, kind of take it in, understand where that person's coming from, and use that as they make their final decision on whatever they're voting on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alan. So, next question. How do you feel, and what do you feel are the most important issues that are coming up? I know we do have some catch-up learning, as you
Sure.
point out, to do. But what are those certainly? But what are some of the other issues that might be coming up that are important to you and that you think are important to Lee County?
Sure. So, like you said, we already touched on it, but I think the biggest issue is that learning loss. So I mentioned that 30 to 50% drop in test scores all the way across the board. That's got to be addressed. And, that's a question I've asked at a board meeting was, what is the plan to do that? And I just get the sense that there is no high-level plan. So I've had a chance to talk to a couple principals in elementary schools, and they have a plan at their school level. But it just seems like there should be a central office plan as well. And I think part of that, so, doing this catch-up work, it's not just going to be teachers. It needs to be community effort, right? So parents, grandparents, whoever's involved. And I think a big part of getting those folks involved is kind of regaining that trust and sharing that information and making sure parents know how bad the learning loss is. Because if parents don't know how bad it is, then it's hard to expect them to show up to try to help, right? So I think, that would be my biggest one. And then something else coming up is all the growth going on around here. So I don't think you can drive more than a couple miles without seeing, one of these big developments coming in. And, I would ask the question, are we prepared for that? I don't know the answer. I hope there's planning going on in the background, but there's absolutely got to be some foresight to make sure we know how many folks we expect to be moving here, age groups, locations, to be able to make decisions about how are we going to keep up with that growth.
Okay. We've had school resource officers in our school now for a number of years. I think students are comfortable with it. I think parents are comfortable. Administrators,
Sure.
Teachers certainly are comfortable. It provides some sort of peace of mind. How would you evaluate the SRO program? Have you been able to observe it and see it in your kid's school? Are there any changes that you would consider making to the SRO program?
Sure. So yeah, that's a good question. So not being a school employee, I'll say that I'm not very familiar with Lee County's program as far as details, but at Deep River, their SRO officer is out. He's out front every morning to help get kids out of cars and building those relationships with kids. So I do think overall that is a very good program, just generally speaking. So obviously as kids, especially when kids get older, we're kids, we make bad decisions sometimes. So having those officers to help assist with issues that come up in school is one thing. But also I think across the country there's kind of a small but vocal faction of folks that talk about defunding police and demonizing law enforcement in general, and I don't agree with either one of those things personally. And so I think that SRO program is a good way to introduce the youngest people in our community to law enforcement and just let them see that these are real people and they're nice people, and they'll joke with you and have fun with you, but then also that they're there to help keep you safe if there's an issue, that they can react and help keep them safe. And I just think that relationship building, between law enforcement and our kids is important. I think it's a really good thing to do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There's some evidence that some of our local teachers are driving to neighboring communities, other counties, because of higher teacher supplements.
Sure.
And what do you think the Board of Education should do to help retain this group? Are there other things we could do besides just salary to bring teachers in?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Bob. And I mean, I would say I'd like to give maybe a little background. So I know right now I think the superintendent's been approved by the board to go request an additional 2% to add to the Lee County supplement, which amounts, roughly speaking, to $800 a year for, I guess, average teacher pay. And the cost of taxpayers is $1.5 million ish. Now I know he came before the school board, and the reasoning was to compete with surrounding counties. And I feel like, as kind of the head manager, so to speak, and the guy that's selling the budget, there's got to be more information there. You can't come in and say, I need $1.5 million to keep up with Wake County. Because if I'm being honest with you, asking Lee County taxpayers to keep up with Wake County wages, I think that's a tough ask. Now, having said that, I don't think I've ever met a person that'll tell you that teachers are paid enough, because they do hard work and very important work. Obviously, they're teaching our next generation. But as a board member, so if I'm elected, I won't have control to give teachers a raise. So I'm not going to promise that or speculate that I would do that. But I feel like there's a couple things that I could do. The first being to evaluate that budget that currently exists and see if there are line items there for maybe some antiquated programs that could be cut, and find some cost savings to perhaps provide that supplement increase. I don't know if it would be there, but it's something that can be done. But then also just work-life solutions. So that's something that, I work in a factory. We talk about work-life. How is people's work-life? So I think we need, anybody that's ever worked for a boss would probably tell you that having supportive management it's very important to how you feel at work. Do you feel appreciated? Do you feel supported? So making sure our teachers, and honestly everybody that works in the schools, have that from the principal level to central office to the school board members themselves. Making sure that all those levels of management are going to support them if they willing to listen to their needs, willing to help if they're putting up with problems or issues, just making sure that they're supported. But then also I feel like there's got to be other things we can do. So I don't know a single teacher who doesn't pay out of pocket for things for their classroom or for their students. So if it's not already there, I don't understand why we couldn't have like a reimbursement program. That way teachers can keep the money that they earn and take it back home, as opposed to coming out of pocket, to pay for supplies. So, if we can't get that supplement increase, well, maybe we can help them keep some more of the money that they already earned, because it's, you're doing the same thing in the end. But yeah, and I just feel like there's got to be other innovative ways to just show these teachers and school employees that they are cared about, and they're supported, and just things that they would enjoy when they come to work, besides the kids that they get to teach.
Thank you, Alan. We've got about a minute left.
Okay.
So if you are successful in being elected, what would be your major goals as a board member for the upcoming term?
I mean, I think my major goal, just as a parent and seeing the things I've seen at the board meetings, I would say that transparency and rebuilding trust with parents would be my first goal. So, making sure that before we vote on something that I share my opinion, and people don't have to agree with it, but I can share where I'm coming from and at least provide some of that thought process so people aren't left wondering, well, where did he get that from? Did somebody tell him to vote that way? Or, I like to research things and have data, so I'm happy to share those openly and make sure people understand, even if they don't agree. And I think that's a big part in kind of mending that relationship back with the community. Sharing the problems, sharing the wins, the losses, the goals that we need help with, just being open with all those things.
Okay. Thanks very much, Alan. We really appreciate your time today, and on behalf of the station, we wish you the very best in the upcoming election. I joined Sandhills Broadcasting and Brick Capital Video in thanking Alan Rummel for talking with us today. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk with Lee County Board of Education candidate Kenneth Wilson. So stay with us. We'll be right back.